Hello and welcome back to another solo episode with yours truly. Today, what we're going to go over is one of my favorite things to go over. Obviously, a lot of the episodes that we would have gone through, that you would have listened to before this one, if you have been listening, is a lot more in relation to injury management, improving performance through the means of improving injury, because obviously if you improve injury, as a consequence of that, performance naturally increases. So today we're actually going to go over how to create your own hybrid training program. I feel like it's very fitting given that I'm competing in a hybrid-esque kind of competition in 7 weeks. So I thought, let's actually go over how an aspiring hybrid athlete like yourself, if you are someone who's trying to get more into this training, or you have gotten into this training and you want to learn how to actually improve how to structure your program, because there is a lot of spinning plates, right? There's a lot, and this is through trial and error and my own learnings. So it took me not a while to learn, but at least this way, if you listen to this or you're watching this, you can learn within 10 to 15 minutes of how to already create your own hybrid training program. So you can start getting and becoming the strongest and fittest version of yourself. And even if you're not someone who's specifically trying to, improve their strength and just their endurance and level of fitness, this is also very, very applicable for someone who trains in a sport. So let me actually go over what we're going to go over in this episode today. All right. In today's episode, what you're going to learn is how I manage my own program, how to create a training program for obviously a hybrid athlete, and the athletes that I work with as well, with multiple training goals. Okay. So moving forward, when I refer to hybrid athletes, I don't necessarily mean just, lifting and running. The way that I define it and the definition that I've taken on is training for multiple qualities that don't inherently benefit one another. Obviously, strength training doesn't benefit running doesn't benefit strength training directly, right? So this is what I'm talking about, and this is why I go over this style of training and why I love this style of training as well, because obviously before getting into it, I just enjoy training a variety of different things on powerlifting and all these other things that I'm sure that you've heard me talk about in other episodes and stuff like that as well. So without further rambling on that, I'm going to go over how I actually manage my own training program, the athletes that I work with, what you need to do in order to create your own training program, and then how you can actually apply this to yourself. Obviously, it's all well and good learning the theory and whatnot, but the application is where you're actually going to be able to, gain some benefit from this. Okay? And stick around to the end. As usual, you have a free gift. I always like giving something. I always like to try and give as much as I can to someone who's trying to level up their performance, someone who loves training and just gives a shit about training and wants to, improve in all aspects regarding their training. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you're going to want to stick around to the end, because it's going to be good. Obviously, you would have learned quite a bit of stuff, but also you'll get some more stuff as well. All right, so win-win. Okay, so let me actually go into who this episode is for in particular. All right, obviously it's a given. This episode is for people who are starting out hybrid training, or if you've already started it, however, you're kind of wanting to learn how to quote unquote optimize and maximize the effectiveness, the efficiency of your own training program, and you don't want to just wing it and kind of continue on with a makeshift training program, right? This episode is for you. Okay, like I've said as well, this episode is for individuals who are also training for a sport. The way that I like to see hybrid training personally, it's obviously it involves training multiple qualities, right? What's involved in the sport? Multiple qualities, aside from the actual skill of the thing that you're doing. If you're able to express the qualities needed within that sport better, obviously that comes from the training. That's why this particular episode is also for someone like yourself as well, okay? Much like everyone else that we work with as well, this episode is for someone who's been training for years and years, at least has it's not for someone who's just never stepped foot in a gym, right? If you've been training for years, you love training, and you know, like I said, it kind of links with the first bullet point here. If you want to, you know, dip your toe into training for other qualities rather than the ones that you just mainly got into with training, then continue listening. This is for someone who's also wanting to incorporate more strength training, maybe comes more from just either a running background, because obviously that's the hybrid athlete that is usually associated when you think about the term hybrid athlete, someone who just runs and strength trains. But if you want to incorporate more strength training, if you do a sport as well, like I said, this episode is for you. And if you're on the flip side, you come more from a strength training background, but you want to incorporate more specifically running, maybe you want to hit your first 5K at a decent time, then this one's for you as well, because obviously I'll go into why I'm actually making this episode within the following slides as well. But yeah, this is definitely for someone who wants to hit their first 5K, or at least, like, you know, improve and be able to do their first long distance run. I know 5K is you know, the usual benchmark for the entry level long distance run in comparison to 10K, half marathon, the marathon. It's obviously just a fraction, but it's still relatively a long distance, right? And like I said, just aspiring hybrid athletes who are currently injured as well, or stuck at a plateau. Like I said, if you've already, like, you know, dipped your toe into hybrid training, but maybe you're stuck at a plateau, maybe your lifts aren't improving, maybe your performance, maybe your running isn't improving, or you're stuck at a plateau and you're not able to progress because you're being held back by an injury, then this one is for you as well, right? Why I'm making this? So there's obviously a lot of information out there and it can get overwhelming. There's a lot of spinning plates when it comes to training for multiple training qualities. If you're trying to start running, I want you to avoid what everyone always ends up doing, which is hurting yourself. So many conversations I've had where people end up getting shin splints, or, you know, some knee issues, or some lower body issues, whatever, it's a hip, knee, or freaking ankle, even a foot, plantar fasciitis, foot pain, that kind of stuff as well. Yeah, this is why I'm making this particular episode, so I can help people like yourself avoid that, or at least like reduce or learn how to navigate those things, right? If you're also trying to start lifting, the same thing applies as above. So obviously, if you're coming from more of a sport background, a running background, you want to start lifting, I also want to teach you how to avoid, you know, potentially hurting yourself, right? I also want to make hybrid training more accessible, less injury prone. Obviously, there's only so much we can do regarding the management of injury. I completely disagree with the term injury prevention, because essentially you can never prevent injury. We can only, the best that we can do is just manage injury, right? So the way that I like to describe it is, it's like asking for a stress-free life. You'll never be able to have a stress-free life, right? I know it's all like relative and whatnot, but the best that you can do is just manage it. And it's the same for me, in my opinion. The best that we can do with injury is just manage it as best as we can. And ultimately, I want to be able to help people achieve the best performance that you've always wanted. Or if you've seen, you know, the really super cool freaking hybrid athletes on the internet and whatnot, and you're like, yo, that looks sick, I want to be like that, then that's a fair enough goal, man. They are pretty cool. I'm trying to be like that. Hopefully I am getting to that stage as well, and I want you to get to that stage too, okay? This is what people end up doing. If you're coming from a lifting background, you end up just trying to freaking PB a 5K every time you run, right? There's no structure to it. You just add on runs randomly, maybe once, maybe every 2 weeks. Maybe it's just a straight up 5K, and then every time you do that 5K, you end up just trying to PB it. You try and run every damn, like, as fast as you can every time you try and run. Let me make this make sense for you, okay? If you're someone who has dabbled in that, maybe considering doing that, or thought, okay, maybe to incorporate running, I just need to do a 5K and try and run that as fast as I can every single time to obviously improve running. This is essentially similar to first starting out at the gym and just trying to 1 rep max a deadlift or a squat or a bench press. I don't want to say that in a way where I'm like, what's the word, fear mongering, but in terms of the skill required within those particular exercises, if you've never ran before, and you're trying to do it for, is even though 5K is it looks like a short distance, it's not. It's a long distance. That's why it's involved in the category of long distance runs, and that's why it's one of the entry level points. It's still a long distance run, right? In terms of the amount of force and stuff that you apply to your body whenever you do run, there's so much more. There's so much more in comparison to when you're doing your conventional lifting and stuff, purely because of physics and gravity, and every time you land and the way that you land, etc. If your body has never been conditioned, has never been exposed to those kinds of forces before, then you try and freaking PB every damn time, that's why you may end up being in a painful position. You might end up experiencing these injuries that often come about when you start running. However, those things can massively be avoided if you were just to learn and incorporate running in a more appropriate manner, the same way that you would do when learning how to lift. Likely, you know that form and technique is massively important with lifting, right? Especially with, obviously, again, I don't want to fearmonger, but a clear one that people associate injuries with is deadlifts. You want to learn how to essentially deadlift properly. You don't want to just try and lift as much as you can, otherwise you may end up hurting yourself. You want to load the things that you want to load. You want to be able to actually train the qualities that you're trying to train, and not necessarily the ones that you're not trying to. Same thing. So just don't do that thing where you just add on a run, try 5K randomly every 1 to 2 weeks or whatever, or like multiple times across the week and try and do it as far like that. That's the worst thing, to be honest. Again, similar thing to just trying to 1 rep max a deadlift every time. If you're coming more from a running background, obviously this explanation that I've just described makes sense as well, and obviously applies to the lifting side of things. You want to do that same thing when you first started running. Obviously, if you're an avid runner, you know that there's a technique to it. There's a degree of learning how to run more efficiently, etc. Same thing with the lifting. I also don't want you to end up doing just a lot of junk work and not lifting to actually make progress. And what I mean by that is just doing a bro split and doing loads of volumes, loads of volume, 3 to 4 sets and a shit ton of reps, etc. Right? If you're training for a sport and you end up just doing bro splits, again, similar explanation as to what I just described then. If you're just doing bro splits, it doesn't make sense. You're trying to improve qualities involved within your sport, right? Unless you're a bodybuilder, that's what bro splits are essentially geared towards and biased towards. You end up training muscle groups in isolation in order to improve not just strength, but mainly hypertrophy purposes. Obviously, those two things are interlinked anyway. As you start lifting, you obviously get stronger. As you get stronger, you put on muscle tissue, assuming that you're consuming enough food. That's a different conversation. Anyway, bro splits do not make sense if you are training for performance. I did the same thing. It just doesn't make sense because the things that you're training within a bro split aren't things like explosivity, reactivity, being able to improve your awareness of where your body is in space with your speed and your power, etc. Bro splits, like I said, are just mainly geared towards building muscle tissue. Unless you are someone who wants that as a primary goal and you're actively trying to improve muscle tissue, increase muscle tissue, potentially even thinking of going into a competition, into a physique competition, then it makes sense. If you're training for something like jiu-jitsu, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So this is what you actually need to do in order to create your program. Okay, so what we're going to go through is essentially the process that I take when creating my own programs for myself, as well as when I create programs for a one-to-one client, one-to-one athlete. Okay, what we need to have is a 10,000 foot view. What I mean by that is, rather than just thinking, okay, this is what my week needs to look like, that's very micro, right? You need to look out, zoom out, If you have any particular dates for an event or a competition, if you don't, then this still applies, but not as importantly as if you did have a competition that you want to, work towards. For example, if you have a race, if you have a jiu-jitsu competition, that's just the thing that's on the top of my head. Plugging those in throughout the year and knowing where those are, and then relating and identifying what your goals are, those two things are going to be massively beneficial, because then you can lay out your structure of your training program as much as you can. Okay, the caveat to this is, as much as you can pre-plan, obviously life things happen, you may get ill, touch wood, things may happen where it gets in the way. This is just a rough template, by the way. If you were to have a 10,000 foot view, a macro view of what your training year looks like, and identifying what your goals are and what you're trying to actually try and improve on, then you already have a good benchmark. You have some goalposts to work around. Make sense? Okay. The other thing is actually understanding how progress actually happens. All right. Briefly, I'll describe how to actually make progress and what progress is a result of. Okay. So you do a training session, you apply a certain training stimulus, whether it's a sport, whether it's running, whether it's lifting, whether it's strength, whatever it is, that is your training stimulus. All right. This accumulates a certain amount of fatigue. Okay. So obviously, if you were to think about doing 5 sessions across the week, all of those training sessions accumulate a certain amount of fatigue. Okay. From that fatigue, your body needs to be able to recover in order for adaptations to occur. And those adaptations are basically the things that you're trying to work towards. Easy one to think of is strength training. Obviously, in order to improve strength, you lift heavy. This increases the amount of fatigue, not necessarily in isolation, but this provides your body with that fatigue that I was mentioning before, right? If you're training across the week, 5 times a week, all strength training sessions, cool, that's that training stimulus. The training stimulus is associated with the thing that you're trying to train. Fair enough? Like I said, fatigue happens, but the more that you apply a training stimulus, the more fatigue accumulates. The more fatigue accumulates, the more that your body needs to recover from. The adaptations, like I said, occur from adequately recovering from those sessions. So this is why it's important to have a structured training session rather than just going 100% full send every training session, regardless of if it's a sport, if it's running, if it's lifting. It doesn't make sense. And if you've done that before within those areas, you know that you don't have a good time. You end up just gassing out. You end up being super, super fatigued, especially if your nutrition and your recovery and stuff like that isn't on point. You know that it sucks. Okay? So that's how progress actually happens. You apply a training stimulus, you obviously understand that there's some level of fatigue in relation to the strict training stimulus that you apply to your body. Obviously, the intensity increases the amount of fatigue. And then off of this amount of fatigue, you need to take into consideration appropriate recovery protocols, which is usually literally the two biggest rocks that people don't take into consideration is sleep and food. Likely, if you're sleeping enough, cool, you're probably not eating enough. That's a big thing that I've realized as well when working with individuals like this. They just completely overlook the nutrition aspect and how massively beneficial it can be towards recovery and performance improvement. But brief explanation to how progress happens. Training stimulus, recovery, and then you make that adaptation, which is obviously adaptation is essentially a fancier word for the thing that you're trying to train. Cool. And then understanding that not all exercises are the same, and understanding that there are different tools that train different qualities. What I mean by this is, if we take the example of doing a bro split to improve performance for sport, that does not make sense. It doesn't. Like I said, the training program that's a bro split training program usually involves exercises that are geared towards improving muscle tissue and muscle mass. Cool if that's your goal. If it's not, and you want to improve different qualities like speed and reactivity, etc., all the other things that are probably more associated with your sport, maybe even rehab stuff, it doesn't make sense. Okay? Caveat to that, actually. With the rehab stuff, just applying a load is like the play, but yeah, that's just a little asterisk. In terms of actually improving performance for sport, it doesn't make sense to just purely do bicep curls and chest press and stuff like that, doing, high volume stuff, high intensity things as well. Because if you're trying to improve the performance of your sport, or you're trying to balance strength training with your running, or the strength training with your sport and all these different things, if we go back to how progress actually happens, all of these different, if you're someone who's hybrid training and performing a sport, there's a lot of training stimulus that you're applying to your body. That means there's likely a lot of fatigue that you need to recover from in order to make that progression. So understanding all of these different things are going to be very pivotal towards you actually making progress and avoiding getting stuck and having that plateau, potentially in a non-fear-mongering way, because the body is very, very resilient, but reducing the likelihood of you potentially hurting yourself. All right? This is how you actually apply this, okay? Like I said, we go from macro to micro, right? And then we prioritize your goals. Essentially, this is what I do when I take on a one-to-one athlete. We break down the short, medium, and long-term goals. Okay, cool. We know that there's these events that we're working towards. If we don't have any, even easier, even simpler. So we have a breakdown of short, medium, and long-term goals. I break down, for me, I usually take short-term goals as within the next within the next 3 months, medium within the next 6 months, long-term within the next 12 plus months. Okay, so that's how I personally break it down. Again, that's not the definitive breakdown of those, but it just helps me categorize, okay, this is ideally what they want to be able to achieve, but also being realistic and understanding, okay, is this something that I can actually achieve? Likely it can be, but you just need to understand that. Sorry, my phone went off. You need to understand that there may be a more realistic time frame for some of the goals that you may have. I'm not saying that's a definite thing, but just take that into consideration as well. Okay? Again, knowing how progress actually occurs and being able to recover from the training stimulus. A massive modifiable one to do with this, and by that I mean just the one that you can immediately apply within your creation of your training program, is figuring out how many days you can consistently train and realistically hit every week. So actually identifying, okay, I can train this amount of time, I've got these amount of sessions that I can do. These are obviously the things outside of everything else in my life. If you obviously just do this more so as not a hobby, but it's not your main source of income, right? You're not like a professional athlete. Obviously, there's other priorities. We need to take those other priorities into consideration. If you're a parent, then obviously there's clearly other priorities that we need to take into consideration. If you have a certain job which requires you to work a lot, also take that into consideration. And that's what I mean by identifying and figuring out how many days you can actually train in a consistent manner. Because there's so many people that I've spoken to in terms of them wanting to train for like 5-6 times a week, but then they end up doing it for the first week maybe, then the following weeks ends up being like 3 to 4, but they can consistently hit that 3 to 4 sessions. So I'm like, why don't we just cut down to this? Because at least this way we're not missing out this training session and potentially missing out the adaptations from this. Plus, this actually allows us to manage that progress, the outcome of progress a lot better too, because we can actually create a program which facilitates this progress in a way that makes sense for the context that you're in, right? Because at the end of the day, you're an individual and you've got loads of other things outside of training that you need to take into consideration. So we need to consider how consistently can we actually train on a realistic manner, okay? And then lastly, selecting exercises that actually allow you to make the progress in the goals that you have. Like I said, not just doing bro splits unless this is a thing that you want to continue doing. Obviously, if you have the goal of putting on muscle tissue, makes sense. It also makes sense, by the way, if you do have that goal to eat properly. And if you don't know what I mean by that, reach out and we can provide some guidance for that as well. But yeah, not just doing bro splits. If you want to improve your performance within the sport, identifying the qualities within that sport, and then picking exercises. Think of it as picking the right tool for the job, right? Picking exercises that help you improve that quality within the thing that you're trying to improve on. Okay? So, got a quick gift for you. I'm just going to quickly go over who this gift is for. So, if you don't want it, you don't need it. However, if any of this describes you, then I think this would be a good opportunity for you. So, who this gift is for? If you want to start hybrid training without the guesswork, like I said, I don't mean just strength training. I don't just mean strength training and running. People who want to train for multiple qualities, this is how I define hybrid training. Okay? If you want to start hybrid training in a more effective manner and not be like, oh, damn, how do I, create a perfect program, and you essentially do your own research and whatnot, and it takes ages and ages and ages, and you end up just getting overwhelmed, and then you just continue doing the thing that you're doing anyway, but it doesn't actually, move the needle forward. This is for you. If you want to become the strongest, fittest version of you, I should have put in there the best performing version of you as well. This is also for you. If you've been wondering how to fit in strength or running or performance training into your training as well, again, this is for you. And overall, ultimately, if you want to lay the foundations of becoming a hybrid weapon, again, doesn't mean the best version of you being able to run and lift. This means being able to obviously do that, but also perform to the best of your ability, then this gift is for you. And this gift is this: a free performance audit. Okay? What this is, it's basically just a 20-minute consultation, a free 20-minute consultation of a free chat with myself on a one-to-one basis, so I can, discuss the things that you're trying to achieve and make a bit more sense of everything that you're trying to achieve. Again, there's that aspect of trying to make the goals realistic, trying to create that program in a way that allows you to facilitate the progress that you want. Then this is what this conversation will be able to help you achieve. All right, so we'll make sense of how you should structure your program, essentially to reduce confusion and the overwhelm, and just make sense of how to actually have an effective training program. I'll also advise you how to structure your training for your goals. Again, just make sense of the other taking into consideration the other things that we need to take into consideration, i.e. life things, work, etc., etc. I'll also provide you with example exercises, because I know that likely you probably don't know specific exercise. Maybe you do, but then I could clarify the exercises that you could be using and implementing within your program if there are specific areas outside of muscle tissue building that you want to implement in your training. Okay, and then I'll give you the guidance that you need to start effectively hybrid training in order to reduce the risk of plateauing, like I said, and again in a non-fear-mongering way to help you reduce the likelihood of you potentially hurting yourself and essentially just being stuck in that position of, oh damn, I keep hurting myself, or I'm just stuck at this plateau, I'm not making any progress, and how do I move the needle forward from here? This is what this conversation will help you do. Okay, if you want this free performance audit, all you have to do is just click in the link below. Obviously, if you're listening to this on Spotify, it'll be within the show notes, and on YouTube, it'll be down in the description box. Okay, click there, and then it's very, very simple. Just follow the instructions on the page that it brings you to, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so hopefully I get to speak to you on your free performance audit. So, to wrap up, the key takeaways are, this is how you structure your hybrid training program, okay? You go from macro to micro and prioritize as well as identify your goals. You break it down into your short, medium and long-term goals. Obviously, identify any events, even holidays, by the way, like events outside of training throughout the year as well. So you can take those into consideration so you can create a program that makes sense as a whole for you as an individual. Understanding how progress actually occurs, which is, like I said, applying a training stimulus, recovery from that training stimulus, which allows the adaptations that you're trying to train and work towards. Okay? Like I said, figure out how many training days you can consistently and realistically hit every single week, so we can have that compounding effect, because that's going to be one of the key things, right? And then making sure this is just I want to highlight this so much because I feel like it's just such a common thing. Don't just do bro splits. Select exercises that actually allow you to progress the qualities that you want to progress in, not just building muscle tissue. Again, asterisks unless this is a thing that you're actually actively working towards. So yeah, that is it for today's episode. Thank you again for watching, and obviously do the usual. Subscribe for more tips on hybrid training, performance, and recovery. Give us a like on YouTube as well as Spotify. Share this with anyone that you feel like it may benefit, or share this your story, etc. It massively, honestly, it means so much to us because we're really trying to push out the long form content. We really enjoy making the long form content. This is so much more, I feel, beneficial and valuable for yourself. Obviously, if you reach to this point, you're clearly someone who gives a shit about their training. So I genuinely thank you. Yeah, just share this as much as you can. Drop us a comment, leave us a question below, because we love engaging with you, especially when you listen and watch our long form videos and obviously our podcast as well. But yeah, until next time, I'll catch you in the next episode.